started the night we moved in. Nothing obvious, just small things, little oddities that I brushed off in the chaos of unpacking. A door that was open when I was sure I'd closed it. The faint sound of something shifting in the attic. My wife, Claire, joked that the house was just settling. That's what old houses do, after all. They settle. The place had been vacant for years. It was a great deal. A big house with a sprawling backyard, far more than we ever could have afforded otherwise. Claire fell in love with it instantly, talking about all the memories we'd make. I tried to share her enthusiasm, but something about the place put me on edge. It wasn't anything specific, just a feeling, a vague sense that we weren't supposed to be here. A week in, I noticed something strange. In the far corner of the backyard, beyond the overgrown hedges, was an old well. The bricks were chipped, the opening covered with a rusty metal grate. It was something I should have noticed before, but somehow I hadn't. It just felt wrong, like it was watching me. That night I woke up to a sound, a steady, rhythmic tapping. At first I thought it was the pipes, but when I got up and listened, I realized it was coming from outside. I pulled back the curtain and froze. The grate over the well was moving, just slightly, just enough to make a faint clattering sound. There was no wind. Nothing else stirred. I told myself it was just the old metal shifting, but my gut told me otherwise. I didn't tell Claire. She loved the house too much, and I didn't want to be the one to ruin it. But as the days passed, more things happened. Scratching sounds in the walls, footsteps on the stairs when I was home alone. The worst part was the well. Every morning I'd find the grate had shifted again, like something beneath was trying to push its way out. Then came the voices, whispered words I couldn't quite make out. They came at night just as I was drifting off to sleep. I'd jolt awake, heart pounding, and stare at the ceiling, listening. Sometimes I swore I heard my own name. One evening I finally worked up the courage to investigate. Claire was out, and the house was quiet. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, my breath fogging in the cool air. The well stood at the edge of the yard, an ugly black hole in the earth. I hesitated, then gripped the edge of the grate and pulled. It groaned in protest, but it moved. Slowly, inch by inch, I slid it aside. I peered down, shining my flashlight into the depths. The beam illuminated rough stone walls, slick with moisture. At first it seemed empty, but then, movement. Something shifted far below, just out of reach of the light. My breath caught in my throat. I leaned closer, trying to see. A face looked up at me. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. It had only been there for a second. Pale, hollow eyes staring from the darkness. Then it was gone. The well swallowed it whole. I slammed the grate back into place and ran inside, locking the door behind me. Claire found me sitting on the couch, shaking. I didn't tell her what I saw. I didn't want her to think I was losing it. I barely slept that night, every creak of the house setting my nerves on edge. The next morning, we found muddy footprints leading from the well to our back door. That was enough. I told Claire we needed to leave. She didn't understand, didn't want to hear it, but I insisted. Something was wrong with this place. We packed up that night, ready to drive to a motel. But as I was loading the car, I heard Claire scream from inside. I ran back in and found her in the living room, pointing at the window. I turned and saw them. Figures standing at the edge of the yard. Dozens of them. Pale, unmoving shapes barely visible in the dark. Their eyes were hollow, empty. They stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the house in eerie silence. My stomach turned to ice. The whispering started again, but this time it wasn't in my head. It was coming from outside. One of them took a step forward, then another. The whispering grew louder. I grabbed Claire's hand and pulled her toward the door. The car. We had to get to the car. The moment we stepped outside, the figures moved. Not walking, gliding, drifting toward us like smoke. My vision blurred with panic as I threw open the car door, shoving Claire inside. I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking, breath coming in short gasps. The figures were close now, too close. The whispers turned to low, guttural murmurs, voices layered on top of each other, growing and twisting into something unnatural. I forced the key into the ignition and turned it. The engine roared to life. The headlights cut through the dark, and they were gone. Nothing but an empty yard. The house stood silent, the well undisturbed. I hit the gas. We didn't stop driving until we were miles away. We never went back, never even tried to sell the house. Whatever was there, it could stay. We moved across the state,